stewardship. We say to people, the dominion mandate was to have dominion over the earth, not to rule, not to own the earth. There's a big difference between ruling over something and owning it. All the parables tell you that Jesus places men over the house to rule it on behalf of the master, not to own it. The big mistake we made is that when God puts us to rule, we own it. And then we contaminate the divine purpose of God. That's why I said to the Lord, I don't want to own anything. But whatever you put in my hands, I want to steward it for you. And stewardship means I'll manage it. That includes my wife, my children, my house, my cars, money in the bank, investments, whatever God puts in my hands. It's not mine. I only manage it. If He tells me to distribute it, I distribute it. If He tells me to care for it, I care for it. But I'm a servant of God. If He tells me to walk away from everything tomorrow, I can walk away from it because I never desired to own anything in the first place. I'm only a servant having dominion over something on His behalf. Are you following me? The church has not graduated to that level yet, but we have to get there. Now, one of the other things that God does, I'm trying to summarize this message as best as I can. One of the other things that God does is, when a season comes, a kairos comes, it doesn't come invisibly. It doesn't come with goosebumps, and it doesn't come in the weird way that we think it comes. You see, we are so dramatic as human beings that we need to feel the goosebump. We like the mystical. You know why Harry Potter is so popular? And children stand in long lines to buy the books of Harry Potter and watch the movies? Is because it's got in it the whole dimension of introducing you to the invisible world, the mystical world, the secretive world. People love it. Do you know why? Right now there's a revival in East London, and people will flock to the revival because we love the mystical. There's nothing wrong in it. It's part of our nature. We've not been built only to enjoy the physical, natural world. We love the supernatural. That's why if you can't get that feeling spiritually, you'll get it by skiing, by riding a motorbike, Pete. Okay? Or bungee jumping, because you want to feel something that goes beyond your humanity. You want to feel like you're in charge. So everything that happens through a man. And that whatever God does, He chooses an agency, a medium through which He will communicate His purposes. Now, when I talk about man, I'm not talking about male. It could be male or female. I'm talking about, let us create man, and in the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them. Okay, so please don't think I'm being gender conscious here. So this agency is called Shalia in the Hebrew. Shalia, S-H-A-L-I-H, or apostolos in the Greek. So the ones that God sends, these are the sent ones. Sent ones. God will send certain people to you. When these people come, they will never draw attention to themselves. They should be able to point you to the one who sent them. They are only messengers. Okay? They are messengers. They come from the throne of God. They often live, they do live, and they are born of men, natural parents. But when they get connected to the spiritual mandate, then they are without mother and father. They are directly connected to the heavens. These individuals, when they come to us, they will come and God will use them. When God uses them, He uses them as if they are an instrument in His hand. They become what I would call a stick in the hand of God, as a rod, a staff, a scepter, a fighting implement. God will use them. These individuals will come and they will lead God's purposes. Now, I'm not talking about one man. It will be a company of people all over the earth. God will raise people up in cities, in nations, and so forth. He does not raise them up in every local church. He may raise a few up in a country, but households will get connected to them, like the sons of Israel that would migrate to a place called Hebron to get connected to a man who was a fugitive, who was a threat to the kingdom of Israel for a large period of time in the person of David. This man was hunted like a criminal, like a rabbit in the mountains. He was hated and scorned. He was regarded as a breakaway. That's what Nabal called him, a breakaway. They said there are many people breaking away from the houses of Saul. So who's David? What's so special about him? So he's a very ordinary young man, but people will be attracted to him. So when a season comes, God releases the season upon that man. That man becomes the mantle, or he's mantled with what the season is. He's clothed with that season. In other words, he's energized, he's equipped, he's empowered, he's configured by that season. And then that man will become the express image of God at that point in time with regards to that season. And that's how God clothes a person with what we call the mantle of the given season. He will not act contrary. In fact, his characteristics will be defined by the season. One of the cues that you can have with this is, if you want to know whether the man is mantled, look at his name. Look at his name. Study his name. When you study the name of the person, it will tell you the characteristics of that season. It will tell you the fundamentals or what God is emphasizing. If Jesus was called Jesus, his name will tell you what his mandate was for that season. To bring salvation, to save. So whatever, if David's name means the beloved of the Lord. What was God trying to communicate in that season? God was communicating his heart by showing us the heart of David. And if you understand all of David, David had not a single bone of malice in him. I can't understand how a man could suffer the way David suffered for almost 1.5, 2 decades of his life. That's close to 20 odd years. He was a fugitive. I mean, it was only at the age of 30 that David will start to be recognized as king. And it was a terrible time, being cut off from your father's house, from your wife, from the people you love, for no reason. But at the end of David's life, at the end of the life of Saul, when David heard of the death of his number one enemy, you would not hear a single word of bitterness in David's voice. In fact, he cried for Saul as if Saul was his spiritual father, mentor, his greatest idol, his most, that he admired so beautifully. He wept for Jonathan, who went into a covenant with him and did never fulfill that covenant. He never did it. Yet he wept for Jonathan, his soulmate, his brother in the spirit. He wept for him and sang one of the most powerful songs that we call the Song of the Bow. That's all a reflection of the heart of God. So when I talk about names, in the name is the secret of the mission. And all of this is in the Old Testament, just very simply telling us how God will use the examples, the shadows and the types to educate you on this present season that we are in. And I think if the season changes tomorrow, then God will name things accordingly in the Spirit. That's why all of us are given new names in God. And our names are always, if you study new names, it's not like you're going to get one name forever. It's like your name is determined by how you fulfill your assignment. In other words, the nature of the season natures you into how you will be named. You know, Jesus had many names, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So many names, and you can camp at any one of those characteristics for centuries and never fully come to understand everything about the nature of that dimension of his name. That's the kind of God we serve. So God names things. So when I talk about mantles of changing season, and I'm going to not go through too much of scriptures, you're going to get that from our website, or if you want some of the notes, I can try and make it available to you. You need to now understand that in the Old Testament is a shadow and a type of everything that we must study for our present journey. Am I correct? Everything was ensampled or given to us as an example What is the purpose of the example? The word example in the Greek literally means a prototype of something that is to appear. An element of something that is not yet in the earth, but God is showing it to us so that we can now see what's going to happen in the future. So it has in it, in theological terms, we call this the proleptic dimension. Proleptic is a word that means from before or from the future. God will place something in the earth now as an indicator of what is to come. Are you understanding? So everything that I will talk to you on the mantle of changing seasons can be divided into the journey of the Old Testament church, which was an example of the New Testament church, a prototype of what is yet to appear. So if you want to get a map of your journey, then you must understand what the Old Testament is. Now, let's forget about Abraham and Jacob and Isaac, because in them God will not only enter into a handshake with Abraham, he will swear an oath to Jacob, and he will affirm it as a testimony in Isaac. I mean, in Isaac, he'll swear it as an oath and affirm it as a testimony in Jacob. So that means that God will ratify until it's clearly understood that he's got a covenant. And in the Old Testament, the covenant, this is where most people make mistakes with the Middle East, especially Israel in the Middle East. Because God set an example through this people called the Jews, we think all of God's purposes will be fulfilled in the Jews. And so we glorify this nation. And this, I have deep admiration for the Jewish nation. In fact, I'm fascinated with the favor that nation carries up to today. And I don't doubt that in the natural, God will have to honor all the promises he made to Abraham and his sons in the natural. But the promise that God gave to Abraham was that they will only own a piece of land in the Middle East. He clearly told you, this land is not for you, it's for Esau. This land is not for you, it's for this person, and so forth. And then he said, this is your land. I'll give you that land. That's the promise. He'll give them the land. It'll be a favored people. They will be extraordinarily blessed in terms of economy, in terms of entrepreneurial skills. They will be protected from the enemy in the most violent of wars launched against them. And they've also made some terrible mistakes in history, like the recent war on Palestine. And yet, while God will judge them, God will honor his word and keep them. So I've got nothing against Israel. You understanding? I love these people. But I love them more because they become the case study for the new Israel, the new Jerusalem, the people called the Zion of God.